having transferred from a home birth, I know that it is not 10 minutes before you're getting adequate care for your child. That is not the way that works.
No, that's what always is so scary to me. I really struggle when I hear people say, well, I'm going to try a home birth, or I'm going to try a VBAC at home, even any of these, but anytime they'll say, well, it's going to be fine because actually I just live 5 minutes from the hospital. And CPMs and lay midwives and a lot of doulas too will say, yeah, it's completely safe because you're so close to the hospital. Look at their proximity to the hospital. But I remember the OBGYN who actually did perform my C-section being like, honestly, if you could have been in our emergency department downstairs and your outcome would have been different. Like, you need care immediately. There's no, so 5 minutes from a hospital, I cringe. And that's my line that I've heard a million times. Liz, you were talking about the line you've heard that you could house with it. I've heard that the 5 minutes from the hospital line is the line I've heard so many times. And it's so important to me that people know that that is not true, and that does not matter. 5 minutes, that's not how it works. And obstetric emergencies, you do not have that amount of time. You don't have 5 minutes.
Right.
Well, you don't, because you're not going in. They're not going to take the word of any midwife who calls and says, we need you to prep because there's a patient coming in who needs a C-section. They've never seen you before most of the time. I mean, they don't know who in the world this is that's calling. It could be a prank. I know that one of my friends who transferred, the midwife, they rode in the car. It was like 3 a.m. and the midwife went running ahead into the emergency department to tell them what they needed to do. Oh, you need to get this ready because she's coming in and she needs help. And they still had to assess what was going on in the precious minutes.
Yeah, they're going to take your blood pressure, take your temperature, put the baby on the monitor, get you in a gown. All this stuff's going to happen because you're not like, unless blood is gushing out of you, like they're still going to do all the things they would do if you go to the emergency room and you're not with blood gushing everywhere. It's going to be several steps. And then you've got to get up to the OB floor. And then, you need a C-section. Well, if you need a C-section stat and all that time has already elapsed, I can guarantee you they're just going to put you under general. You won't see your baby born. You're going to be put to sleep until and woke up to see what happened, if your baby lived or not, because they don't have time to put an epidural in. They don't even have time for like a spinal block at that point. They're just, when I had an abruption in the hospital later with a later birth, it was a partial abruption and it stopped bleeding and he was okay. And I ended up still delivering him normally, but there were 20 people in my room within a minute of me starting bleeding. 20 people filling the room, having me sign a consent for going under general because I had not had an epidural. And when the bleeding stopped and his heart rate was okay, they said, we really recommend you get an epidural because you will not have time. If you start bleeding again, you will not have time, and we will not have time to give you an epidural. So you will be asleep when your baby's born. So I got an epidural for the rest of that labor because I didn't want to miss my baby being born. But that wasn't something that had never occurred to me, that you show up in that dire of a situation, they're just going to knock you out.
Right. And there's not going to be an OB there. You're lucky if maybe you call ahead and they think, okay, well, maybe we'll call the OB and who can be waiting. And
depends on, if you're in a rural area in a small hospital, they've got to go call the OB and he's sleeping at his house 20 minutes away. So, maybe the ER doctor delivers your baby, and maybe, it's just a hospital 5 minutes away does not mean you have a C-section 5 minutes away, which is really a lot of the time what you need.
That's how that is
to deliver a baby too. So you're waiting on everyone else who's on call to get in or on standby.
Yeah. I actually had for mine, I did have a doula, and I always say I had one of the good doulas. I really did, because she's I still talk to her. She's a friend of mine. And she's very evidence-based in how she does things. She really truly is a doula that stays in her lane and is just a support person. And I really, really feel good that I had her there. But she actually described to me, she said, Megan, I hadn't been feeling well. I definitely could sense something was wrong. I wouldn't have guessed that I was having a uterine rupture, but I guess something was wrong. I wasn't feeling well. And she went to go, so she described, she said, Megan, I went to go get you always joke about Jula's getting ice chips. She really was. She went to go get me ice chips. And she said, I went to go get you ice chips down the hall, and there was a code blue, and like there was 30 people in your room when I got back. So in the time she just did that, that's how quick that transpired. She said that was, I walked in and just like, what's happening? What's going on? Because just that time she walked down the hallway, that's how fast that transpired. She said, I walked in and there were 30 people in your room, and they were flipping you on all fours and getting you to sign something. And that's how fast that happened. And you just were out of the room. And I stood there like, what just happened? And so she's telling me she was like, that was just, she said, on one hand, I was so impressed with how well that emergency situation was just managed. But she said that was mind blowing to me to watch that happen.
And that happens at a home birth and is a totally different story. You've got your kids there. You've got your husband going, what's happening? What's happening? And your midwife is going, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. I think this is what's happening. And everybody's just kind of like chickens with their heads cut off, not sure what to do. Like my midwife said, would it be faster? It'll probably be faster if we go in our cars instead of calling an ambulance. And I was like, and my doula is going, should we call 911? I think we should call 911. She goes, no, it'd be faster. Let's just go in our car. It's like, how do you not already know what if you're going to go in a car or an ambulance? How do you know? And then we all stumble up, and then she's like, oh, you're not going in my car. Cause I start going towards her car. She's like, you go in her car. I'll drive my car. I'm like, wait, you're not going to be in the car with me? And it was like, that is not the same as what would have happened in the hospital in that scenario.
So I'm wondering with midwives, which we've talking a lot about this, but it's like, what do they do when things go wrong? When they actually notice, because we obviously know it takes them a little bit to maybe figure it out, or maybe they know, but they think they're going to have this amazing outcome anyways. Or, something like that. But when things are actually going wrong, things are actually going sideways, what can the midwives do? What do they do?
Oh, I feel like I'm talking too much, but.
Oh, you're good.
We
know a lot about this.
Yeah. My midwife, when we tried to transfer, we get out to my doula's car. I climb in the seat and I go, she's coming out. And so I climbed back out of the seat and waddled back into the house and climbed up onto the couch and delivered her. I was wearing a skirt just on the couch. And my midwife gets behind me right when she's coming out. I caught her, but she comes out and lays down on the couch, and I moved to the side and she's obviously not breathing. And so my midwife's like, she realizes, oh crap, I just put my bag with all my equipment in my car, in my trunk, and it's locked. So she tosses her keys to my photographer and says, go unlock my trunk and get my bag. So she doesn't have anything, not even a bulb syringe, because my birth kit's upstairs. She tells my husband to get a bulb syringe. She picks up my baby and starts pulling blood out of my baby's mouth, because there was blood coming out because I had an abruption, and sucks blood, spits it on the ground, sucks it out, spits it on the ground, then starts doing CPR on a soft couch. Somebody said, she says, get me something hard. And then by then she's brought back in the bag and she sticks a binder underneath my baby. Cause you're doing CPR and she's going into a soft couch. She puts a binder for my kids' homeschool, that you open up and has the spirals in it, and slides that under my baby and starts doing CPR on her, and then tells my husband to call 911. That's what she did in an emergency. And then she opens up her bag and pulls out, she had a DeLee, which is like a thing that sucks, like it has like a little tube, and you put it up in the baby's mouth, and then she can suck without doing what she'd already been doing, which was sucking blood out of her mouth by herself, to start suctioning out the meconium and the blood that was in her nose and mouth. But and then it was 6-8 minutes till the paramedics got there, and then they continued working on her in the living room. And it took, I don't even know how many minutes, but it's not like they just grabbed her and flew off to the thing. They worked on her and got her onto it, then got me on a gurney. I was passing clots and nobody was attending to me, because my midwife was just sitting there going, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe she was in complete shock. She couldn't function. And so I was like just bleeding and passing. I thought I had passed the placenta, and it was a clot that I picked up in my hand that was like that big. And I was like, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding. And they put me in the ambulance, and they put her in a separate ambulance, and they took us to 2 different hospitals. And those hospitals were not the hospital 5 minutes away. They were 35 minutes in traffic away. And so we drove, and then they worked on her for an hour at the children's hospital. And they never got her to come back. So I heard that all that staff had to have like some kind of like grief stuff, because they were so upset, that it was so upsetting for everybody when she came in, because they tried for an hour to save her. It's like, but my midwife sat on her heels while, she didn't even have equipment out, and she had no idea what to do. And, yeah.
They're not prepared. They're just
No.
not prepared for when things go wrong. First off, finding the warning signs of something happening is one thing, but when things are actually going wrong, they're not prepared. When our son, his heart rate decreased, he was obviously in distress. We got in the car, but it was like, I'm bawling because I already know at this point, like, it's bad. And she starts making phone calls. Like, why are you making phone calls? Who are you calling? I don't even know. Then all of a sudden she's like, oh, I'm going to call the doctor, whatever. She calls the doctor, who I thought was their backup doctor, but it turns out it wasn't. He's just a doctor that was nice to the natural birth community. Tells them that this is a situation, and like, basically, could you get us in? Are you there? And he's like, yeah, I'm here. And he's like, if you're near a hospital, go to that hospital. But if you're close, come here. At the time, I mean, we're going through all these things. I'm crying, whatever. We're just following what she said. She's like, do you want to go to the hospital? He's waiting for us. And I was like, sure. We get into the car. She's having me sit this way, lay that way, do this, have this, drink this, do all these things before we even get rolling. Then we're like going however long in traffic. It feels like forever to get to the hospital. I mean, that's the other thing, is like, if you don't go by ambulance, you're driving yourself in frantic panic, and you have to go through, stop signs and stoplights, and all these different things are happening, and you're, driving like a hysterical person. And we got there, and it was a completely different situation of the transfer that we were even told about. The doctor didn't know who she was. We came in, he said, who's Christy? And there was my mom and her, and my mom like pointed. And so we'd never even seen her. She was not prepared. She didn't have anything, whatever. We drove out of the way. We passed a hospital. I didn't even know that we should have went to another hospital that was closer. But they did right away take us in, like right away, because he knew we were coming. And to be honest, he probably has seen the train wrecks. Like, let's be honest, he worked for the natural community. Like, he didn't work for them, but he helped them. He was like, yeah, you can come to me and I'll take you. So I'm sure we weren't the first, and we weren't the last that he's had come in. So when they put the monitor on, and they couldn't even hardly probably figure out my heart rate to his heart rate, and it was really bad. I didn't even sign anything. I didn't anything. They asked me what my name was and my date of birth, and I like nodded. I don't even think I actually verbally said anything. I was just crying, and they took me back to immediately go get a C-section. And the transfers that you hear of, it's only a few minutes away, it's only whatever. It's not like that. You have to load up in the car.
How many minutes do you think it was from when you guys said, okay, we're going to transfer, till when you got your C-section?
I would say that probably just driving to the hospital, I'm going to take a guess that it was at least 20 minutes. That's my guess, just driving there. Now, I can tell you, because I mean, like I said, he was more prepared for us to be there. So they were waiting for us. They had a wheelchair when I got there. I got immediately taken the wheelchair immediately up to labor and delivery. So I didn't have to go in any other door. I went right up to the wing. And they immediately took me into a room. But you still have to go, like, if you think about that, as fast as that is in your mind, the hospitals are big. and you're getting wheeled down a hall, and then you have to go up an elevator, and then you got to go wheel down another hall, and then they're like, oh, not that room, but that room. And then, you know, and the staff's all pouring in and they're trying to see whatever. And so I'm sure it took us a few minutes just to even get up to the wing and the area that you're supposed to be in. And then I don't think the monitor was on me. Like I said, they were strapping me up with the monitor the minute that I went in the room. I don't even think I was in the room for like a couple minutes, because like I said, they asked like, you know, is this your name? Here is your date of birth, you know, whatever. They might have asked me if I consent for them to give care, because they were not my providers. They were not, I had never seen any of them. And I think I was just kind of like, yes, do whatever you need to do. Like, and I was bawling. And literally they wheeled me down the hallway and they were stripping my clothes off before I got to the room. That's what I remember, is that my clothes were just being flung off and I was being taken to the room. And so it was like minutes. So even if you think about, you need like 5 minutes, we've already passed that driving in the car. Maybe we've already passed that just getting up to the room to where the doctor was, even though they were trying to be as fast as possible, like humanly possible, basically. And with all their staff that's ready, they're all following me. They're prepping the room. All these things are going on. It's just not enough time. If we would have been there, it would have been different. But because of all the travel and all the time of whatever, it just wasn't enough time. And another thing that you guys have brought up was when we got in there, they were prepping me right away. I didn't get put in a gown. I was in my clothes. They were prepping me already, and he was already scrubbed up and ready to go. I went into shock. There's another thing that you don't take into account. My shock wasn't, you don't know what shock is, but shock was, I flopped around on the table like a fish, literally a fish out of water. And and the nurses had to come and surround me and hold me to the table because I would have fall off. And they can't do a C-section. They couldn't give me anything. They couldn't do anything. And so I don't know how long that went on, because I was in shock, but a guy came in and they gave me an epidural. But the doctor had told them, we do not have time. And they were literally, from whatever the doctor had seen, from that monitor, he was literally going to cut me over. I was not getting a general. I was not getting anything. They were getting baby out immediately because he still had a heartbeat. So they wanted him out. So that's what I don't think anybody thinks about. A transfer is scary. And it's things that you would never, ever, ever imagine in your worst nightmares of what it actually is like. It's terrible. And to put by the way, the epidural, I've had an epidural later on. I had another C-section. They put it in, they check you out, they do all this, and they make sure that it's working and that it's in the right spot and everything's good. Well, I literally, during the shock, I remember the head nurse was like talking to me, but I didn't hardly hear what she was saying. They flipped me over, put it in, flipped me back open, and they were cutting me open. They did not check it to see, they didn't, whatever. It was that fast. So it was extremely fast. The hospital was extremely on it, but it just was not enough time. And I don't think people think about that. A transfer, the safest place is the hospital. They're ready for you, in action, ready there, but to get you in all those things, they're not ready. They're not prepared, even of the fastest possible of what they did, exactly what they did. And yes, my son got worked on for 47 minutes before the head guy came in and called it, but the nurses were not giving up. They were determined because he came out alive, but he had so much meconium from probably all the distress that had been going on for at least 24 hours. They couldn't get out of his lungs. It was just so thick. So yeah, that's what a transfer looks like.
Yeah, I think they have an idea in their head that it's just going to be like, I mean, honestly, when I was thinking about the transfer that might happen from a home birth, my thought is I might not be able to take the pain and want an epidural. And so we'll all get in the car and we'll drive and I'll get an epidural. Or I just never imagined the transfers that I know that have happened and the transfer that I had, like that was not even on my radar. The downside to a home birth, I thought that the risk was that the pain, I wouldn't have any pain relief and I might need to go to the hospital to get pain relief, like if a labor went too long and I couldn't deal with it anymore. That was what I thought it was the biggest risk in my head. That was because I was like healthy low risk mom. I'd had healthy births before, and I just I was not prepared, and I did not believe that there would be anything that bad that could happen. I didn't know. I was foolish. I was uninformed. I'm sure you beat yourself up for for the rest of your life, for the last 11 years, like continuing to go. I was stupid. I was selfish. I was I wanted the birth I wanted, and I didn't get the info that would have changed my mind. And I don't know. I hope that I keep telling my story. It's painful, frustrating. People hate me. People are tired of hearing it. Lots of friends that I had are no longer friends. I get vitriol all the time for it. I don't do it because I enjoy telling my story. There's nothing enjoyable about it. I only do it because I don't want there to be another mom who says, I didn't know, I had no idea. Like if you can watch all this, you can hear all these stories and go, I'm still choosing a home birth. Well, I wish you the best of luck. I don't want a mom to go into it completely unaware of the risk that you're facing. If you can accept that this is the risk and not be persuaded by the home birthers who say, oh, there is no risk. They're just disgruntled. That baby's dying in the hospital too. It would have happened in the hospital. If you can get past all that and believe us when we say my situation would not have happened in the hospital. Had I started in the hospital, my baby would be alive. She would be turning 11 in a week, and that's a fact. If you can look at that and go, okay, well, it's still worth it to me. The risk is worth it. Then, Godspeed. That's your choice. I believe that women should have the choice of what they do with their body, but I also believe that they should be fully informed on the risk, and your midwife is not going to fully inform you on the risks.
And that's something to think about when your midwife talks to you about informed consent. If they're talking about what a doctor would say and say, well, they don't tell you C-sections have this risk or that risk, they need to be honest. If your midwife is telling you the only reason, or the most likely reason that someone would transfer would be for pain control, that may be true. But we also know the statistic for transfers in countries where midwifery is highly regulated and home birth is something that's safer. I think it's like 30% transfer rate. So
Wow.
It's not necessarily just for pain relief. It's okay for your provider to have that discussion with you about risk. And if you're choosing a home birth, you need to know the reasons why a transfer would happen and also how a transfer would happen, what it looks like. Do they have a plan?
And I think that's another thing is what plan do they have? Do they have
Right.
a transfer plan? Did they even discuss a transfer plan? Like our transfer plan was very vague and very like, you're probably going to, same thing, you're probably going to go to the hospital because you want pain relief. You're a first-time mom. You've never experienced birth before. So you'll probably be in pain and want pain relief. And they don't tell you like things can go wrong. They don't tell you that your baby can go into distress. They don't tell you that you could hemorrhage, that you can, they don't tell you any of these things. Like there's no really like risk when you're hearing, even picking your midwife, deciding to go that route. You don't hear the risk. You just don't.
Right.
The one risk that they'll go is no matter what, going to the hospital is going to equal a C-section. That's what I heard many, many times. If you go to the hospital, you're going to get a C-section. That's not
Right.
true.
Right. This, the inquest I went to, that was just totally an unusual occurrence that the coroner, who is a nurse in York County, South Carolina, heard the dispatch of an ambulance to a birth center. And as she listened, she realized that it was a demise. And she wanted to know more about it. She couldn't believe it. So she called an inquest to investigate. And during the testimony, the student midwife, who was the one that they asked to call 911, did not know the address of the birth center. So, and their emergency equipment is in a closet. They don't even bring it to the birthing room. They have this, I guess, oxygen tank, but they don't bring it in. They just keep it in the closet because they really, I guess, they are so biased. They think they won't need it. And to me, that was, and I'm sure to the members of the jury, it's kind of interesting. The coroner's inquest, they do have a small jury, 6 people. I'm sure it was very unusual to them that they thought, and if you're at a home birth, sometimes they tell the doula or the friend or somebody, call 911. Well, does that person know the address? And on a cell phone, yeah, most communities now have the identifier of the address, but I don't even know if that's universal. But or it was just astounding. And that also was a post-states baby who was not able to be resuscitated.
Well, when it comes to transfers, the one thing that people should know is that you should be pre-registered at the hospital, and the hospital that is your intended destination for a transfer should have a level 2 NICU, because 1, your baby's more likely to need help than you are, and you need at least a level 2 NICU. Level 3, probably not in most hospitals. But that same hospital is going to be a higher resource hospital, and that hospital will have an OB on site. That hospital will be set up for stat C-sections. But a lot of times what I get from the birth community is some kind of vague plan that the midwife implies that she will take care of everything that needs to be taken care of. And it usually means she doesn't have a clue when she's going to wing it if anything happens. And she's not going to ask you which hospital to go to. If you call an ambulance, they will ask you which hospital to go to.
Well, we know from other situations of an ambulance getting called, depending on what's going on, you're going to go to the closest or the one that has to handle the certain care that you need. So like you brought up with the NICU, you could end up that you're going to go to the closest hospital, but your baby's going to go to the NICU hospital and you end up being separated.
That's what happened to,
yep. Like there's so many varieties of things. So maybe your planned home birth, hospital that you picked out in your transfer stuff with your midwife that you were like, yeah, this is where I'm going to go. And this is what I'm going to do. Doesn't work out, because if you're not driving yourself to the hospital, you're going to end up wherever they end up taking you, or wherever that there's different types of ambulance groups. Like in a big city, we have a bunch of different ones. So some of them might only go to a certain place or whatever. It really depends on where you're located and what's going on too. Now we have COVID and all that stuff going on too. So that's another thing, is that certain hospitals might not be able to take you. And so you're going to have to drive out. The closest one might have been 5 minutes away, and maybe they did make it to your house within a few minutes, but now they're going to have to take you another 10 to 15 minutes, 20 minutes away to get to the other hospital, because that hospital isn't taking,
that's what happened in my area. The main hospital in Akron is doing all deliveries. So there's like another hospital in Barberton that's connected to them that usually does deliveries all the time. They're now a COVID only hospital. So all deliveries are taking place 20 minutes away. So you might have been right next door to that hospital that was set up to do deliveries before, but now you would have to drive 20 minutes away to Akron to go deliver, because they don't take you.
Yeah.
I noticed that our 2 biggest hospitals near me, Riverside and Ohio State University, both have relatively low COVID populations. And I think they're doing that to preserve trauma capacity at the 2 hospitals most capable of doing it. So things are not, you do not know what you're going to get in the transfer situation right now.